once your mind relaxes, the body relaxes. And if you think about it, in every single cell in our body, we have the capacity to store emotion. So quite often we hold on to that. So when you do breath work and you get to a stage where the mind and the body are relaxed, then you let go of it. So you start to, so these suppressed emotions can result in crying, can result in laughing, just emotions kind of coming out.
Welcome to another episode of the Build Smart Blueprint. Today, I'm really excited to have Damon on the podcast. So Damon is the founder of Adapt and Flow. I would put it, based on my conversations with Damon, as a kind of consultancy, a coaching practice to help individuals, particularly in the built environment industry, help using cold water therapy, breathing practices to essentially, I think, operate better. So really excited to have you on the podcast, Damon. And I wanted to start with actually just understanding a little bit about your story, because I think it's very interesting how you found yourself, exploring cold water therapy, Wim Hof, things like that. So could you just give us a bit of a background into how you found yourself in that space?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And thanks for having me on. Good to be here. Um, so, well, start from the beginning, and I'll try and give you the short version. Otherwise, we'll be here all week. Um, so, I'd been in recruitment for about 15 years, architecture and design and construction professionals. And I was running my own business. It was going okay. And 2019 was, a year where I thought I was kind of nailing life and the business was growing, but I started having these memory lapses. And to start with, they were always a couple of days after drinking or a day after drinking. So I thought there was a connection there, and I just thought, I'm getting a bit old and I'm a bit stressed from running a business, and I'm getting closer to 40, and maybe that's just, it was always temporary memory. So, as an example, the first one happened. I've gone out on a Saturday night, drunk far too much. On the Sunday, I went for a hike. And then on the Monday, when I woke up, I felt a bit strange. I was like, I know where I am, because I was out in France at my parents' place. I know where I am, know who I am. But why am I here? And I just couldn't figure it out. So I called my mum and said, Mum, why am I out here? And she could have filled me in. Within about 5 minutes, everything kind of came back to me. And I was like, oh, yeah. So I just thought, because it's temporary, I didn't really think too much more about it. That kept happening more and more and more. And it was always, every time, it was always a day after drinking. Um, but the more we got closer to Christmas, it started leaving me feeling a bit strange, and my family were getting a bit worried about me as well. So we'd been to a family wedding for the weekend, and then that evening when we got back, it was the Sunday evening, within the space of about half an hour, I'd gone down and asked my parents twice. So I know you're probably going to think I'm a bit crazy. Where have we been this weekend? And they'd say, we've been at the wedding. And then I'd get, oh, yeah, it's fine. And then I'd go back upstairs, and then half an hour later, I'd come down and do exactly the same. And at that point, I was kind of getting really confused. And so were they. So they booked me in to see a neurologist. And I thought, we're going to go and I'll see this neurologist, and they're just going to say, oh, yeah, well, you've got some sort of chemical imbalance. There's a few little things going on. So let's do a few tests, and then we'll probably just give you a few pills which will regulate your hormones or something like that. And off you go. But they said also, let's do an MRI. And I didn't really think too much about that. But anyway, I had the MRI, and the results came back, and kind of Christmas started with, well, we found something. You have a brain tumor. It's right side. It's pretty big. What we can tell at the moment from the scans is that it's slow growing, low grade, and it's probably been there for a long time. So it's not panic stations, but it is serious. So we'd like to do something about this. So wasn't really the Christmas I was expecting to have. But it, well, yeah. And that was just over 5 years ago. That was the end of 2019. And you might remember that COVID was kind of just about, starting in the background. And I went forward. My consultant put me in to see a surgeon. had a great chat with him. He filled me with confidence. He was really kind of calm and just said, look, essentially, a glioma is Latin for lump. So you just have a lump there. You've been out cycling and skiing all last year and riding your bike all the time. So don't panic. You've been doing all that with this there. So life's going to be okay. It's serious, but we can deal with this. So I got booked in for an operation, which was February the 11th, 2020. And the type of, and the operation was a success, but before I could go into that, it's probably just good to explain that brain tumors these days are graded 1 to 4. And you'll probably remember, or probably kind of familiar with the phrases benign and malignant. And
Hmm.
they tend not to use that. They're kind of phasing benign and malignant out because benign sounds quite friendly, and they're not that friendly. Um, so I got my diagnosis, and they said, "Well, you're a grade 2. You're an astrocytoma grade 2, which means that it's low grade, slow growing, but it's diffused. So grade 1, it's from what I understand, it's very clear. There's a really defined edge. They can go in, they operate, remove everything, and then off you go. Once it goes to grade 2 and above, there's no clear edge, so it's really hard to kind of see where one starts and where one finishes. So an operation is to debulk, remove as much as possible, and then which in doing that you reduce the odds of anything. There's less surface area to kind of go wrong, so to speak. And then you've got a watch and wait policy, they call it. And I hate that phrase, the watch and wait, because it's like, watch and wait for what? For it to grow, for me to die? It's like, oh God. And I could never really get my head around that. Um, but surgery went really well. I got really lucky because, as you know, February 2020, COVID was just in the offing. I had some
Yeah.
friends who were kind of in Hong Kong and Singapore, and um, it was things were moving a bit quicker over there. Well, that's where it started from. I didn't really think about it coming this far. But then, yeah, after surgery, it's been about 4 or 5 weeks later. I got pretty fit before surgery, and then I could have continued up on an indoor trainer because I was a bit worried about going out on the bike because I'd been diagnosed with epilepsy because of the tumour, which meant that I'd had one seizure. I was quite lucky; I only had one, but it kind of made me a bit wary. So I bought an indoor trainer so I could kind of keep fit and cycle without knowing that I'm going to have a seizure out in the middle of the country somewhere, and either on a road or on a kind of dirt track, and it'd be a bit nasty. So I got really fit, and within 4 weeks of having the surgery, I was out on my bike again, and life was kind of moving forwards. And then COVID hit, the business went really quiet. Recruiting architects and the whole construction industry, pretty much. You probably remember it went pretty quiet overnight, didn't it? And because none of us knew really what was going to happen. So my business went really flat. And at that time, I just thought to myself, I've been talking to a kind of contact, kind of client of mine who said, "Oh, I'm doing this coaching program." And it's about, they talk about, we call ourselves core energy coaches, and it's all about quantum physics, biochemistry. Everything is energy, and there's energy behind our thoughts and our emotions and our actions. So when you understand that energy, then you can really get to the core of what's going on. And I like the sound of it. And they had a mission statement, which was, we want to change the world one conscious mind at a time. And I thought it's a little bit cheesy, but at the same time, I really did quite like it. It felt like something a bit, I'm not religious per se, but it felt like something spiritual, a bit Buddhist, Hinduism. Kind of, I was like, oh, I like the sound of that. That's kind of, I think this is for me. So signed up to the program and kind of went through, I think it was about a year long kind of process of 3 different modules. And I guess at the time I was thinking, well, I might go back to recruitment, but these are kind of giving me some skills to kind of, you're talking a positive language, you're learning about yourself, and there was something also you're learning about the power of the mind as well. And the mind is a powerful tool if we can learn to harness it. Um, but so 2020 was a good year because the surgery could have put my mind at ease, but there was still that lurking question of what if it grows, and I didn't really know how to answer that. And every 6 months I'd have a scan, and just to kind of see Terry, gave him a name, Terry the tumour, see what he's up to. And the first few scans were fine. And then we get to the summer of 2021, and they said, well, its results are back in, and it's been growing. So this is where we sit down with you and discuss your options. And I just turned 40. I just got engaged, and I've kind of just set up this new business, moving out of recruitment, and I've launched Adapt and Flow. And then within a couple of weeks, I was then having discussions of your tumour's growing, and we need to do something about it. And I just hit rock bottom. It felt like my life could have dropped off a cliff, and I just kept saying to myself, like, I've just turned 40, am I going to live to see 50? And I didn't know the answer to that, and I was absolutely petrified. That summer was a real, probably the lowest I've ever been in life. But it was also a summer where something started to happen, and this is a bit that never forget, because I was at the lowest place I've ever been in life, and then I didn't know it, but I was looking for something. I was looking for a bit of hope, a bit of proof, a bit of inspiration, because I knew the mind and body. I'd heard all these. I remember hearing stories about, we only use 30% of our brain. If we tap into 100% of it, then we can do anything. And, the mind really is the matrix. It's a powerful machine, and we can do anything. We can heal. And that's the main thing I was thinking about. Can I just heal myself if I just think it enough, and will that happen? But I didn't have any proof, and I didn't really know how to do that. So I was still in this kind of petrified state. And then I found two things that summer. Because that summer I could have went from down here to up here. And the first thing I found was a book called Radical Remissions: Surviving Cancer Against the Odds. And it's the 9 key factors that all people who do survive against the odds have in common. And when I started looking at these 9 key factors, one was change your diet, which made sense. One was use herbs and supplements. And then the other 7 were mental, emotional, and spiritual. And so nothing about fly off to the US and get the latest kind of treatment. There was one guy in there who had a brain tumor, because they gave all these case studies, and it's now turned into a website, and there's so many testimonials and kind of case studies that with all this proof of like people who are using, not just saying no to Western medicine at all, but just using both, using kind of holistic as well as almost where East meets West, and it's lovely. And there was this one guy with a really severe and aggressive brain tumor, is inoperable, and he went away to South America and found this kind of a guy called something John the Baptist, and just meditated with him for a couple of years. And now I appreciate we don't all have a couple of years to kind of go to South America and meditate, but he did, and his tumor completely disappeared because he deepened his spiritual connection. And that story was enough for me to kind of go, all right, okay, that's some proof. Even if it's just one person, it's proof, because we all have the same raw materials. And then so that could have started me. And then the summer beforehand, at the beginning of lockdown, I'd read a book called Breath by James Nestor. It's called Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art, and it talks about all the different healing breathing techniques and the different effects they have on your body. And I remember there was a guy in there called Wim Hof, and this guy that I remember, he was just absolutely bonkers. He sounded like a bit of a nutter, but a lovely, a lovely nutter as it turned out. But I remember them just saying that he could heal himself, or I couldn't quite remember what it was. So I went back to it, and I started doing a bit of research on Wim Hof and bought his book, and downloaded the app and started practicing this method, because he kept saying in every kind of interview that I read or listened to or watched, he was saying at the heart of all disease, it's inflammation. So if you do the breath work and you do the cold, you'll reduce your inflammation, you'll boost your immune system, you'll increase your red blood cells, increase your white blood cells, which is your immunity, and you rebalance your body, and you become, his phrase is, happier, healthier, and stronger. And I heard this, and it just resonated. I was just like, yeah, I believe this. So it became my placebo. I downloaded the app, started practicing. I'd get up every morning, do 3 or 4 rounds of the breath work, have a cold shower, And by the end of the summer, that was I started that in June. By the time we got to September, which was when I was starting treatment, I was feeling really good. I was like, I felt I'd taken the power back, so I felt I actually had control over my health. But physically and mentally, I was feeling great, and emotionally, I was like, I had loads more energy. I was going out on the bike, doing kind of PB times, and feeling like I was in such a great place. And I believed it. So that summer, nothing had actually really changed apart from my mindset and my belief system, because I'd gone from thinking I'm powerless and I can't control anything to shit, our bodies are amazing machines, and if um, we can learn to kind of master our mind and kind of stimulate our body in the right way, like through things like the Wim Hof method, then anything's possible. Become the master of your mind, then that's why placebos work, because your brain thinks it's getting something it's not. And when the power of belief is everything, so when it believes it's happening, it taps into your internal pharmacy and to create all the kind of um, chemicals, proteins to kind of help the body heal. That was a kind of the beginning of my Wim Hof journey, and it just it took me to a great place where I was starting treatment, and I was feeling really comfortable and happy about the treatment. If anything, I was almost excited when I started this YouTube channel, and I called it the Chemical and Radio Diaries, and it's like the power of positivity. So I wanted to kind of document me going through treatment, um, just to kind of prove to myself, and also my hopefully send a positive message to other people saying, well, look, if you're going through a journey like this, then join me and we can do this together. And I hope they're going to give you some proof that whether it's mindset, whether it's cold exposure or breath work, all the things that we can do, that will help us. I then kind of fast forward to the end of treatment. Treatment wasn't a breeze, but I think that practicing the Wim Hof method definitely helped with my side effects, because I joined a Facebook group called Wim Hof Method Cancer Survivors and Support Group. Everyone on there was saying, like, keep up with the breath work, keep up with the cold, because it helps, it helps reduce inflammation and reset and rebalance your body and boost it. So during treatment, that's really good, and it helps limit the side effects. Doesn't mean you don't have any side effects. It just means that the body's in a better position to kind of handle the treatment and absorb it, and also to kind of come back, because chemo is essentially it's quite effective, very effective, but it is killing lots of good cells as well as the rogue cells. So your immune system gets a bit of a kicking in the process. Um, so that could have really helped me all the way through, I think. When we got to the end of treatment, scans have been great all the way through and kind of showing that the tumour was kind of shrinking. Not loads and loads, but it was shrinking enough that the key goal was to kind of stabilise it and ideally shrink a little bit. But that wasn't ever a kind of, this will definitely happen. It was more that's a hope. When we got to the end of treatment, I almost had a bit of I'm going to call it a tantrum. I don't really know the right word to describe it, basically. Well, I had the fear, but I don't know whether it was quite fear. Not the same fear as I had the year before, because I now felt empowered. But as an example, I had a friend going through treatment as well, and he had bowel cancer, and he got to the end of his treatment, and he had a scan. It was all clear. He got to ring a bell and say, "Hey, I'm all clear. I've got no evidence of disease." And with brain tumors, you don't get that. I got to the end of treatment, and they said, "Well, we're in a good position, but there's still a bit of residual mass up there. Terry's still there. He's stopped growing. He's now shrinking a little bit. But this is you for the rest of your life. You're in a good position. You look well, but you have to. It's still there, and that's a bit I couldn't really kind of get my head around. And I had to make a bit of peace with it. And I remember writing a letter to Terry saying, "Left you out in the cold. I'm now going to bring you back in and make you my friend. So if I can show you love," which is quite a hard thing to get your head around, because you think, oh, I don't want to acknowledge it because that might make it grow. But actually, once you look at the whole body and think, no, I love you, I'm going to send you love, and that will help it heal. But I was still in this phase where the business was starting to kind of move forwards, and so that gave me purpose all the way through treatment. I was practicing the Wim Hof method every day. I was getting up, doing my breath work, doing my cold. And I was out walking the dog one day with my mum, and we're having a chat. She's like, "Well, I've been trying to do this breath work, and it's just not getting on with it. Can you just become an instructor, and then you can teach me for free?" And I could have laughed, and then at the same time, I was like, "That's brilliant. Why have I not thought of doing this? And it worked kind of perfectly. I wasn't quite perfectly with my kind of business. I'm helping people with their mindsets, and it's had such a big impact on me. It literally changed my life, and I think I'm going to say it saved my life, or is one of the fundamental things that did help me save my life. Um, so I started training to become a Wim Hof instructor. So I went through all that training. I've now been qualified for a year and a half. Um, but I think the thing I'd really like to highlight is I still have, ever since June 2022, when I finished treatment, I still have scans every 6 months. Um, and every single scan I've had since then, including the one in January just gone, shown that Terry keeps getting smaller. Now, I'm now having conversations with my neuro-oncologist, and he's saying, "Well, this is great. Technically, I mean, he doesn't say technically we shouldn't be here, but technically, what's meant to happen is you're meant to be stable." And that's it, really. But I'm now 3 years on, nearly 3 years on. I'm shrinking a brain tumor through breathwork, cold exposure, my mindset, my belief system. And I'm not doing anything special. I'm just doing the Wim Hof method. I've changed my diet a bit. My diet was always fairly good. I have recently stopped drinking because I want to give it an extra turbo boost, and happy to discuss that later on. Don't know what, as much as it's so ingrained in our society, and I love a drink, but I just thought I think I might regret this if I don't. I want to walk and talk my health and well-being kind of business and be a health and well-being expert. So I should at least try not drinking for 6 months to see what it does to my body, my mindset, my business, and more importantly to Terry, see if it gives him another little turbocharge. Because at the moment, everything's heading in the right direction. So let's chuck everything else I can at it.
Can I ask the process of you becoming a trainer, was that different to just a practitioner of it yourself? Like, did you have to understand it in a different way, or
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So with there's kind of three phases or three modules to the kind of training. The first one is just to kind of get you up to speed so that you know how to practice it if you haven't practiced it before. You understand a little bit about the science, but you know what it's doing to your body essentially. You know that, as an example, the breath work is changing your biochemistry because you become a bit more alkaline because you take in lots of oxygen and release a load of CO2. And you know that with the cold exposure, it's releasing a load of adrenaline, and that adrenaline is helping to release a molecule that helps reduce inflammation. Um, you get to get a base level, and then modules 2 and 3 are when module 2 you learn a lot more about the science, and start learning things like molecules interleukin 10, which is our natural ibuprofen. So you learn the science behind the breath work, behind the cold. You study the science experiments that Wim Hof went through to kind of get him credibility and put him on the map as someone who's credible as opposed to the service freak, which he kind of was seen as for quite a long time. Um, and then module 3 is all about, okay, you know this. How do you teach it? How do you relate that to people are going to show up to a workshop? It's all very well knowing what to, that you can practice it yourself, but how do you teach other people this, and how do you make it relevant to their everyday life? Instead of quite often with, whether it's something like yoga, whatever it is, with exercise, it's like, well, why should I do this? What's in it for me? And it's been able to kind of articulate that in a very precise and kind of well, I'm losing my words as I say the word articulate. But in a way that's just tell tell a story in 5 minutes of the power of the Wim Hof method and the breath and the cold and the mindset, and so that people they're not listening to you for a kind of a 3 hour lecture on why
Mhm.
why to do it. It's making it easy, accessible, because that's essentially what Wim Hof's done. He's taken a Tibetan breath work, which is thousands of years old, taking cold exposure and then mindset exercises, and he's packaged it into something that's really accessible. So you can download the app and you go, right, let's do 30 breaths, and you follow it. It's guided. Then you have a on the app, then you can go in and say, I'd like this is how long I'm going to spend in the cold, and you follow the kind of breath work to kind of a different sort of breath work is just kind of slow breathing to kind of calm you down. So the method has been made really accessible. So if the method's successful, then you've got to make it accessible when you teach it, and teach it in a way that you keep it really simple, really clear, because as long as you need to know about the science behind it as an instructor, but not everyone needs to know the details. I mean, you might get some people that turn up to a workshop and they're real geeks and they love that kind of, I love my science, and they want to know all about, so what is interleukin 10? Well, actually, it's a protein, and it's and what are different parts of my body that have been affected. And you get to learn all this stuff, but you don't need to share it in every single workshop.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just making sure that people know how to do it safely, and what it's doing to their body and why they should do it.
When you were talking, you've mentioned a few times breath work, and then you also mentioned the kind of cold therapy, cold showers. Most people are those two items. Are they like so heavily interlinked that you basically, if you're doing one, you should be doing the other, or would you look at them as sort of two separate things? And do you sometimes get, for example, working with people that just want breath work or just want to work on the cold, and do you then say to them, no, they both come together? Or I'm interested about.
I think for me, it's that there's so many science experiments that WIM and a lot of control groups have kind of done, that have shown that together they really increase people's healing abilities, essentially the ability to kind of reset, rebalance the body and reduce inflammation. But for me, it's about saying, trying to get people into kind of healthy habits. And so some people might prefer the breath work, some people might prefer the cold. So it's about start somewhere and know that if you do both, then it's going to have a bigger impact. But actually just doing one is better than nothing. If you take the breath, for example, we could go weeks without food, we can go days without water, but we can go only a few minutes without air. So the way we breathe massively impacts our day, and some ways can make us sick, and some ways can make us healthier and happier, and kind of improve our fitness and our mindset and our state of mind. So it's about finding what resonates to you, and I'd rather give it to people in bite-sized chunks. Some people come along and they're like, right, I'm all in. I'm going to do the mindset exercises. I'm doing the breath and cold, but just starting with one of the three
Mm-hmm.
is good.
And do you find, because obviously in your practice you're dealing a lot with people in the construction and architecture industry, which is very high pressured, but also there's a lot of things that happen in the office like there and then. And I'm wondering whether, do you find people generally tend to be drawn more towards the breath work because that's something you could kind of do in at your desk, compared to, you can't just like take a shower in your office and reset. Do you find that when we're talking about kind of professionals in a management situation, that breath work a little bit more applicable?
Absolutely, yeah. It's as you've hit the nail on the head there. It's accessible. So if you're having a stressful day, then the most simplest and most powerful bit of advice is take a step back and breathe in and out through your nose. Extended exhale for kind of 3 to 5 minutes, and you're going to take yourself out of your stress response and come back into your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and repair. And that's when that's when you're in homeostasis and can think clearly again. So yeah, the power of the breath just to kind of calm yourself down, and then go and send that email that you were going to send in a bit more of a calmer state when you're thinking a bit clearly, as opposed to with all the adrenaline in your body thinking, and you might tell someone to F off without meaning to, So yeah, I think the breath is the most accessible one. I mean, quite a few offices do have showers these days, but for me, I think that when you bring the cold and a practice into something, it's about consistency. It's about doing things at home that set you up for the day. And if you look at something like the cold, then you can have a shower anyway. So you can habit stacking. You can have your shower anyway and just have it cold, but start gradually. And that will start to build up your mental and your physical and your emotional resilience and tolerance. You can deal with the stress of a cold in the morning. Psychologically, you can then deal with the stress of whatever else happens, but you're also teaching your body to deal with stress in low doses, intermittent acute stress, which is good for us because we live in a world of constant low level stress, which, because it's low level, doesn't sound very threatening, but it is threatening because we're still having a physical stress response as if we're running away from a tiger, or so our body's adapted through years to have a stress response in the first place to protect us. But now stressors are mental, they're emotional. Our bosses, their clients, their parents, children, our siblings. So for me, I think it's about breath is a great thing to use during the day. Actually, if you can install a habit on for a weekly kind of practice or a daily kind of practice, consistency is a key for everything. If you want to change a new habit and change a new way of thinking, of being, then you have to kind of practice these things. And the science has said, so I think it's weeks it takes to instill a habit. Actually, sometimes it can be a lot quicker than that. If you have the right motivation, say for me, like 3 or 4 back in 2021, when the news came in, I didn't have a problem cracking on and kind of installing the habit of the Wim Hof method. It took me probably 2 or 3 days to kind of go, yeah, I'm into this, because I had that real deep, the shock to the system, the motivation, and it was there. But if we're just trying to install habits generally without a real deep motivation, then we have to kind of practice them and practice past that stage of rewire your brain so it goes, oh, I'm used to this. This is what we do at this time in the morning or this time in the evening.
Yeah, I've certainly found, even for myself, in my own experiences of taking cold showers, that there's a tendency to be very reactive around it, as in when there's an external driver that makes me want to do a cold shower, or do a week of cold showers, because I feel that I need to reset, or there's certain things that are just stressing, but then almost once it gets to a proactive level, the urge is not there anymore, and I wonder whether you see that quite often in terms of people struggling with the consistency of it. And it sounds like with yourself, you obviously had a big driver to maintain consistent because you were seeing benefits, but also it was, to some extent, life or death. It's really, but for most of us listening to this, because especially with Wim Hof, I think a lot of people are aware of cold water therapy, the benefits of it. They like the idea. They've maybe tried it, feel pumped afterwards. But then, once it gets to like the third week and it's a Wednesday and it's raining outside and all of that, it kind of drops off. And then suddenly I'll start on Monday and all of that. So can you speak a little about, your advice on that, or your experiences of that, and how perhaps people can maintain a bit more consistent with it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great point, because they're been running Wim Hof workshops for kind of a year and a half now. And I would imagine, quite a few people who come along to a workshop may never practice again, or they might do when reactive. And please, that's not a kind of criticism. It's more just, come along to a workshop. It's fun, it's engaging, and you have a good experience. And then you've got to have that real driver and motivation, or want to kind of do it on a kind of daily or a weekly basis. And that does take a bit of commitment. But you've got to have the motive to kind of want to do it. So I think one of the perceptions as well, which I think you honed in on, which is very valid, is it can be seen as something we do reactionary way. Okay, I'm going to do this for a little bit just to kind of help me through a certain phase, when actually we look at the lifestyles we're leading at the moment, our bodies are constantly being deregulated. whether that's through social media, kind of scrolling, which means we get a quick dopamine hit and then we come crashing back down because dopamine has this pain pleasure kind of seesaw that it does, and the quick we got dopamine originally. It was kind of originated because hunter gatherers would go out, and if you're putting in prolonged effort, sustained effort into something, dopamine gets released to keep you motivated, so you can keep moving forwards to find your prey or find a food or whatever it is that you're kind of looking for. So when we do exercise, prolonged effort, or we finish up, or we engage in a project, some project work that takes a while, putting in a lot of effort, we get a dopamine hit slowly and naturally released in a sustainable way. Whereas if you can just go on social media, have a look at Instagram, get a quick hit, and your dopamine levels go up and then they come back down and crashing, and that deregulates our system. So every day, if you think about, when I say this, I'm always a little bit conscious that I might sound a bit negative, but I guess I am a little bit, but also that we have the power to take it back. So every day, our bodies are getting stressed and inflamed and deregulated from emotional, mental stresses, toxins in the environment. There's so many different types of stress that are kind of happening to our bodies. So the Wim Hof method is a natural tool. It's nothing new. Wim's just taken something ancient and kind of brought it forward. But it's a way to re-regulate your body every day. Rebalance your blood work, because every bodily process we have, as an example, we release carbon dioxide as a byproduct. And carbon dioxide is kind of acidic in its nature. When our blood work becomes acidic, our thinking gets very sluggish. It means our nervous system isn't working quite as quickly to send all the signals around, and our blood's not as clear, and it's a bit more clogged up, so to speak. So the idea of, we have a cardiovascular system, so we can breathe in the oxygen, and it goes down into our lungs, into our blood, and then it delivers the oxygen to our organs and our cells to kind of feed them, and then it takes away the waste product, and then we breathe that out, and it does that with toxins as well as nutrients as well. They go in and then they kind of we release a toxin. So every day our body's getting a little bit inflamed through the process of just whatever activity we're doing, that we're releasing a toxin or CO2 into our blood. Then put on top of that emotional and mental stresses that kind of, we're in a prolonged stress state, so your body's getting more and more inflamed. We also lead these really comfy lives. And I'm sitting here in a lovely house. I've got a roof over my head, put on the heating if I need to. I can put it, so we can live really comfy lives. And I had a brilliant phrase by a guy called Gary Brecker. He was on a podcast with, I think it was the High Performance podcast. Gary, from my memory, is a neuropsychologist, and he said the pursuit of comfort leads to the aggressive pursuit of aging. So ultimately, the more comfortable we get, we need our bodies to be stimulated. That's why exercise is a good form of stress, because it is. And things like the Wim Hof method are low-dose intermittent acute stresses. They're what we call hormetic stress. And the principle of hormesis is where our body is naturally adapted and evolved, and our biomechanical response kicks in to a natural stressor, like going out into the cold or seeing a tiger and thinking, cheers, stress response, give you energy to run away from the tiger. But we don't get those stressors anymore. We get a low-level constant stress, which is draining us all the time. So actually, if you put yourself consciously into a bit of stress, low-dose intermittent tube, like a 2-minute ice bath or 2-minute cold shower, exercise for 30 minutes or even 20 minutes, these little HIIT sessions. Fasting is another form of hormetic stress, and it kicks in our biological adaptive immune system, which then helps. The example I always give is, if you go to the gym and you lift weights, your muscles tear and grow back stronger. Hormetic stress works in the same way, but at a cellular level. So it means your cells get put under a bit of pressure, and they go, oh, we're going to remember this, and we'll come back stronger. So they kind of tear, so to speak, and come back stronger and help repair and rejuvenate. Hence why the cold exposure, me practicing the Wim Hof method, has led to kind of shrinking terry, I think, because it's reducing the inflammation, but it's also that hormetic stress. It's resetting, rebalancing my body, so it's in homeostasis. And when our bodies are in homeostasis, they can use all the hormones to regulate and make our bodies stronger. And we have natural cancer killing cells and all these things that will kind of keep our bodies fighting off pathogens all the time. So we need that small dose of stress in our lives to kind of make us strong.
And what does someone that is practicing the Wim Hof method regularly, what does that look like in their day-to-day life in terms of how long does it take? Is it usually done at certain times? And, taking out situations, stressor situations in the day that might need you to do like ad hoc top-up stuff. But what do you advocate as kind of a standard level of tasks or things that you would do on a day-to-day basis?
I would say you need about 15 to 20 minutes for the breath work. I mean, what you're looking to do is 3 to 4 rounds of the breath work, which, yeah, should take you between 15 and 20 minutes. It might take you a little bit less to start with. And then you're going to have your shower anyway. So have your normal shower. And then at the end, the advice is just to gradually build up and your body will start to adapt and tolerate and start to build mental and physical resilience. So have your normal shower anyway. Turn 15 seconds cold at the end. Do that for 3 days. And then move up to 30 seconds. Do that for another 3 days until you get up to 2 minutes. So for me, if you can find 15, 20 minutes in the morning for the breath work, and then you don't need to find the time for the shower because you're going to have a shower anyway. You've got an extra 5 minutes for mindset exercises. That can be in the evening or it can be any time of day. But the breath work's best done on an empty stomach, first thing in the morning. And I find a cold shower in the morning for me, as well as I do the breath work and then go and have a cold shower. And it just makes me feel alive. And you get a load of happy hormones released, you feel alert, and it's cleared my head. And there's only one thing you can think about when you're in the cold is, how do I get through this? And it's breathe through it.
Mm-hmm.
And at some points, we can actually learn to enjoy it and relax into it. People might be listening to this thinking, there's no fucking way I'm going to enjoy a cold shower, but so many people have started it, and the people who do practice it start in the first couple of days and I really don't like this, and then they'll come back to me after a couple of weeks and say, I love cold showers now. I can't not have one, and I'm finding it almost a little bit addictive, and it's great for me. And that's been with people. I've had people in their 30s say that, as well as a couple of guys in their 70s who started. So you're never too old to learn a new trick.
And I'm interested because I'm not actually looked into the Wim Hof method, although I've heard it. But any time I've ever done any cold therapy, whether that's outdoors or in a shower, I've just switched the cold water on and just jumped in. I didn't. Is there a reason why you or the Wim Hof method generally, it seems to advocate more like to have a normal shower and then in terms of a normal temperature and then slowly turn it? Are you saying slowly turn it colder or just turn it from normal straight to the coldest temperature as opposed to just jumping straight into a cold shower?
I guess it's looking at sustainable practice. And some people might be able to just jump into a cold bath or an ice bath and just kind of breathe their way through it. But that takes a certain type of person who's got those kind of motivations. If you want to build a sustainable practice, then just start small. It's like with any habits, don't take on too much. Just build small, build momentum, and after a month, you'll actually start to see results. So don't try and take on. If you want to climb Everest, just buy a pair of hiking boots and have a little walk around the garden, or go for a walk around the park first. You don't have to get to base camp straight away.
Yeah, and actually, just you saying that makes me think. Well, answering almost my own challenge earlier, which was, I'm fine. Like, if the situation calls for it, jumping into a cold lake or under a cold shower, but actually, over the long term, it probably would be more sustainable if I just did it in a gradual fashion, as you said, and actually doing it every day. So that's some value I've got from that, just off that piece. I'm curious as well, just to move on to the the way that you actually work with your clients as well, because you've mentioned, there's books, there's an app, but I believe that you actually work on an individual and a group basis with people wanting to implement this. What's the difference between kind of doing it on your own and working with someone like yourself, and how do you help them? I think that'd be interesting to understand.
I think if people come along to a workshop, whether that's just a breath workshop or a Wim Hof fundamentals workshop, which is exploring breath, the cold, and the mindset, which are the three pillars of the Wim Hof method, it's an experience and it's also an education. You get to understand the science and how to practice it safely, how to prepare for it, how to then what you're doing during it, and how to warm up, as an example, afterwards from the ice bath. So you get to know how to install a regular, consistent practice safely. Um, when you do it on your own, and also there is the thing of the breath work. A lot of people come along to a workshop and their main thing on their mind is, oh, the cold, okay, the cold. I've got to do it. I want to do it. I want to do it. And actually, when they leave, they've done the cold, but it's the last thing we do. But it's actually the breath work session that kind of gets people, um, like, that gets people talking because they've had an experience that they've never expected to have. And you essentially, Wim's phrase is get high on your own supply, and get to a different state of mind through the breath work. And it's more of an experience. So I practice a breath work on my own every morning. And sometimes I have a little bit of meditation music on in the background. Sometimes I don't. But when you come to a workshop, the music there is designed to take you on a bit of a journey, and it's take you through an experience. So it's so much more of an experience when you come to a Wim Hof workshop.
Yeah, I actually it's not Wim Hof, but it's a book called Combative Breathing, and the guy talks about this. He actually has a warning at the end of the book. He's like, look, if this chapter might not be for you, and I advise to do it with other people just in case. But he talks about basically like inhaling, like opening your lungs and just sitting there and just inhaling really deep, repetitively at high speeds. And I remember reading it because he talks about when he has done it in groups, just people just start crying. People just start, so much emotion comes out just because we're not used to giving our brains and our body that much oxygen. So I really, I can imagine being in a room with lots of people doing that for the first time could be pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, I look back to, the workshops I run, but when I was at the Wim Hof Academy, we going through our training and we'd have a breath workshop every morning. And we're all in floods of tears. Some people are laughing. It's just, we hold on to so much every single day. So breath work is a great way to get your body and your mind to relax. And once your mind relaxes, the body relaxes. And if you think about in every single cell in our body, we have the capacity to store emotion. And so quite often we hold on to that. Often than not, we hold on to that emotion. And so it gets trapped in our bodies. So when you do breath work and you get to a stage where the mind and the body are relaxed, then you let go of it. So you start so these suppressed emotions do kind of start bubbling up to the surface, and can result in crying, can result in laughing, just emotions kind of coming out. And what I would say is don't be afraid of that. Emotions are meant to flow. And actually it's quite peaceful. Like during that process, it might feel there might be a lot of stuff coming up that you might have let kind of pushed down for a while, but afterwards, when there's a storm and you go outside after the storm and it's kind of just that stillness in the air. That's kind of how you feel and how your body is after a kind of breathwork session if you've released a load of emotion. And it's good for us. It's painful sometimes, mentally, but it's what we need, because the more we can let go of stuff, the better it is for us, and we can kind of then start to replenish our bodies with the happier, healthier thoughts, and things.
And did you mention? I think you mentioned that you do some workshops for companies as well in terms of companies getting all their team in a room and you're actually working with them. Did I understand that right when you told me that before? Is that
Yeah,
how it works?
absolutely. Yeah, so I guess I've got two sides to my business. Well, for me, they are the one and the same thing. There's a Wim Hof method, and then there's core energy coaching. And core energy coaching is looking at kind of quantum physics, biochemistry, and looking at you from a point of view of that everything is energy, and energy is everything, and it's energy behind our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. So that I have a framework that I use from IPEC, which is the coaching school I went to. And we have 7 levels of energy. And I put people through an assessment. They get to understand how they've been shaped by the world, how their subconscious, their programming is affecting their lives. And the energy levels look at the 7 levels of energy. They all have different characteristics. So it's nothing new. It's just putting a framework um, to be used in an environment. Like, as an example, level 1 energy is our flight, and it's associated with overwhelm, anxiety, doubt, fear, and it's there to protect us because we step back and we disengage. Level 2 is fight, and that's when we experience feelings of anger, conflict, resentment, and that's our fight. And both of those are catabolic and associated with adrenaline and cortisol being released. And we need those because sometimes we need to stand up for ourselves and make a clear decision, and sometimes we need to disengage and protect ourselves. So catabolic energy is our stress hormones, has a place, but we don't want to be in it all the time because it's draining our body all the time. And when you have the anabolic levels 3 through to 7, 3 as an example is the ability to tolerate a lot of negativity in order to kind of keep moving forwards towards a goal. 4 is service to other people, and you get a good feeling from helping other people, but you need to balance that with not giving too much, otherwise you'll drop into um, catabolic energy because you're overwhelmed or frustrated or resentful. Um, Level 5, we just see opportunities everywhere, so it's a very growth orientated mindset. Level 6 is intuition, empathy, and connection. And then level 7, we're kind of sitting on a cloud humming because we are the creator. Nothing's real, but we create things. So, which is great in the design industry because that's when our brains become alive. And we're not there for very long, but every day we experience all 7 levels of energy. Um, so it's just understanding the characteristics behind them, understanding how you've been shaped by the world, and then saying, okay, what do I do now? How do I want to be showing up every day? Because you think about 95% of our day, we're in our subconscious, which on the one hand is amazing because it means we don't have to think too much. We've got these programs running away in the background. We're responding, interacting, and engaging with life, but we're not always aware. These little habits have formed over the years, which might mean we're causing ourselves tension without meaning to. So when I put people through an assessment, um, they get to understand through the debrief session how they've been shaped by the world, and then we look at the plan of what next. How do we make stress and energy work for us and not against us? So when I run workshops, they are on stress, getting people to understand stress and different types, and how it's showing up for them, and then making a plan to kind of move forward with that. And that's great in the group environment as well because we're all a bit different and we start learning from each other. And then also to understand energy. Another workshop I do is energy leadership. So looking at the 7 levels of energy and then playing out some role plays and scenarios of how can we use what type of energy do we need to engage if we're having a crap day, if a client's just called us and kind of said that they've moved the deadline forward by 2 weeks and we've just got a day to kind of, it's all hands to the pump and we're stressed, things are going on at home and, it's what kind of energy do we do? What do we need to do to ourselves? They give us space to kind of calm ourselves down, focus, and then what kind of energy can we then bring to a situation? So it's about helping people to understand their reaction, then respond to it, and in a more powerful way, and engage in energy that's going to be more productive. Um,
It sounds interesting because specifically around the different levels of energy, I I've had several conversations quite recently, some with some clients of ours and some with some peers that still run construction firms, and something I heard, people saying in different ways, but it was essentially the same thing, which was when I get on site, the way the guys expect to be communicated with and react to getting stuff done, and the way people communicate to me is just at a lower energy level. And basically when you're in the office or you're not around anybody else and you're thinking high level about the business, but then there's that challenge of you go in all kind of positive at that higher levels of creativity and things, and you get on site and this is done wrong and this guy's swearing and this guy's doing that and this guy's talking about he's getting kicked out of his house, and you're just like hearing all this stuff, and I think there is a real and even being in my own situation as well when running my company, I remember as soon as you get kind of involved in the site stuff, your energy levels tend to drop, and it's a whole challenge to kind of get that back up before you go home. Otherwise you start spilling that shit onto the family and stuff like that. So it's interesting that you're talking about it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely, and that makes what you just said kind of makes perfect sense. And for me, it's about helping the individuals, but then also helping the group. So, as an example, one of the workshops I do is the understanding or energy leadership workshop. We go through the 7 levels of energy, and I encourage people, the teams, to kind of then start using the characteristics from the levels to define their group culture and how they want to show up as a group. What do we do in this situation? And also to understand that we all respond differently to stress. So when you get those conversations happening, they say, well, when I'm stressed, as an example, the other day I ran a workshop and the CEO said, well, I'm stressed. I put tight deadlines for myself because I need that kind of thing. And then realize that in doing that, that puts pressure on other people that isn't always healthy. So it's understanding that this is how I do stress and this is how you react under stress. So once we can understand each other a bit better, we can then come to an agreement of how do we work together. That's how you respond. This is how I respond. And what are our group rules now? Of the characteristics from levels 4, 5, and 6, and 7 that we want to be implementing, and where are our healthy boundaries for each other and as a group as well? Where's the line crossed? And when those conversations start happening, and for me, it's about creating a safe environment so people can have those conversations and saying, when you did that last week, that actually really triggered me. I know you probably didn't mean to do it, but it's about getting those open conversations, because otherwise, if they don't happen, then they get worse and worse and worse, and then you end up resenting someone, and you hold on to all this energy, and then it comes out in a way that you don't want it to. And it's not productive for anyone, for yourself or for that other person. So it's about
the last question I had, Damon, was just staying on this topic, but it kind of feels like a bit of a burning question for me when we're talking about that kind of coaching side of your business. Presumably, when a business owner, gets you in to work with the company, they somewhat relate to when you're using the terms energy and using these kind of different levels, and they kind of probably have some level of understanding of that, and consciousness and things like that. But when it comes to you walking into the room and you've got team members that are basically told, you've got to go to this room at this time and be on this workshop, how are you? Surely you have the challenge there of like communicating that to somebody that here's some of these terms you're using and is just like switching off, but still keeping them engaged. Are you changing the terminology? Have you got any advice you can share there? Because I think certainly, again, I've been in that situation. I know other individuals that have exactly the same challenge, that they struggle to communicate this stuff down to the team.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that's a great point, and I think at the heart of success of workshops or success of management and leadership is giving people, letting them know they have a choice. If you're told you got to go to this workshop, then it very much feels like, oh, I've been a naughty boy, I better go along, and you show up with with a resentful energies. To show up with level 2, you're in fight or flight, and you might relax slightly during but you won't get the best out of it. So when as if you're a leader in an organization, then it's about you know, simply active listening and providing your choices. And as an example, I worked with a company recently, and people didn't have to come to the workshop. It was given as a choice, or this will help, and hopefully that will then mean that I'll go back in and do the workshop again for other people, because they've actually said, "Oh, you know what? I've heard some good feedback from other people, or this is whatever the feedback might be, and it's a choice. So I'm gonna go back in and I'm gonna raise my hand and say, yeah, if that guy comes back in again, I'd be interested." So I think the power of choice is when we feel we have a choice about something. I don't say the word choice. It's a lot more empowering, isn't it? We're mostly told what.
Yeah, makes sense. I definitely can see. A few episodes ago we did some interviews around health and safety and managing that as a culture in the business and engaging um, all levels of the team, site level, management level, director level, in that conversation. I sort of see this really relating, taking, I think others that are even going through that process can learn a lot from what you're saying here around giving choice and understanding, what energy levels different people are at when certain situations happen in the business. So I appreciate your time on the podcast today, Damon. We will drop your website onto the show notes if anybody does want to contact you. And you've encouraged me anyway to definitely start a more sustainable approach around cold showers. So I'm going to check it out.
Well, that is thank you, and thanks for having me on, JP. And just for you and the listeners, on the Wim Hof website, in the top right hand corner, there's a little thing that says free mini class. You can click on that, and I think it's like 10 hours overall. It's spread out over a few different sessions, but there's some kind of great free stuff on there if people want to kind of get going. And
yeah, we'll drop that on a link as well, so everything's accessible for everybody. But thanks a lot for your time today.